Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
Bravery is something, but courage. And it's like, do I want to be brave in my life or do I want to be courageous? Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello, and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan, and this is my friend and co-host, Danelle.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Okay.
Today, we're back in Dallas.
We are.
Yes.
I'm not going to talk.
It's
I'm not.
115 degrees.
Okay. See, you did it. I was like, I am not going to talk about the weather. I will not. I refuse.
It's
but
really something.
it is not good.
No.
This is horrible. Anyway, yes, I'm back in Dallas. I felt like you were in New York with me.
Yes.
And I felt like it was just a good time to probably travel back with you. And,
Yes.
And spend
you.
a little extra time with you.
Thank you.
And you want to talk a little bit about, I think it just goes well with our topic today. We're going to be talking about bravery versus courage and the role of each. And you had what required of you and your son, you both had to exhibit some courage.
We did.
This weekend.
I mean, here's the deal. Mm-hmm. So I dropped Cooper off this weekend at NYU to participate in a summer program for musicians.
Gifted musicians, of which he is. Yeah. Yes.
So there'll be about, 20 kids in this class. And I just underestimated the monumental anxiety
dropping your kid off in New York.
Dropping your child off in New York. So I really had a lot of empathy for you. I could tear up talking about it.
Okay, well, don't.
I know. I can't help
you know
it.
What? Cry.
Go. Yeah, let go.
Let go. Let it rip.
Vulnerable.
Let it rip.
Yes. But it was just so like, oh. And I think for both of us,
It was.
Cooper and I both.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were both really strong at first, and then we weren't.
Yes.
And it was kind of cool to walk in those shoes with him of courage. I think it was brave to decide to go to New York.
Yeah.
I think it was courageous to actually do it and for me to walk out the damn door and leave him there.
Right.
So anyway, long story long, thank you. You were a huge support in that and allowed me to just feel and be really honest about how that felt. I'm really trying to do that.
Yeah, you did a good job. And what I had to be conscious and almost had to coach, you don't know this because we haven't talked about it, but I had to coach myself to say, let her feel whatever she needs. Don't tell her it's going to be okay. Just let it run its course, because I've been there. I've dropped Mackie Payton off.
Lord, yes.
She was a year older than Cooper when I dropped her off at summer camp. But yeah, there's just something, and NYU, by the way, does an incredible job of doing everything they can to put you at ease as a parent.
Yes.
But you're still dropping off your kid in New York City, which I'm getting my tail back to New York and I will be taking Cooper to dinner.
Yay.
So
He's gonna love that.
Yeah. So he has people in New York to support him, but at the same time, just that very first, it is. And it's why I want to talk about this topic, because I think when we can understand and distinguish whether it's moments in business or moments in life where we're either exhibiting bravery or courage, we use them interchangeably. And that's what I've been studying this for a while in my own journey. And I think it's important for us to, as leaders and people, to know the difference, because I think we can use both of these acts, because that's really what they are.
Yeah.
We can use them to our benefit. But I thought this weekend was a great example of both of you. And so I'm honored to be along this journey with Cooper and with you. And yeah, it was again, interesting to watch. Interesting.
I drank a lot of wine.
You did.
You fed me a lot of drinks.
Yes, we had other tools in our toolbox, but wine was certainly.
I'm just saying.
Walks and shows and good food and friends and laughter. I had prepared.
Yes, thank you.
Yes,
God.
I was like, I don't know which one of these tools are going to be necessary. It turns out all of them were necessary.
All of them. Yeah. So thank you for your support. And then on that note, in New York, we also made a trek to a new borough.
We did.
To see Mackie.
Yes, Mackie Payton moved to Brooklyn. She's a Brooklyn girl now.
She's a Brooklyn girl, and I really love it.
Yeah.
not only her place is obviously neat because she's a neat girl and it's beautiful, but well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know.
Neato. Just to clarify. But it's so green and wooded and
yeah, it's different.
Homey. It's funny because Aaron was like, "Did you see the Huxtables?" You remember that show? I know I was like too soon, but
But
yes. He's like, "No, man, that was in Brooklyn." I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I can see that. I can totally see that."
The brownstones and the cobble streets, and there's just Brooklyn, and Brooklyn is really large. Like Brooklyn is huge, and I didn't realize that.
Compared to the others.
Yeah, because I know Williamsburg, and like I know Dumbo, I know some certain parts of Brooklyn. I certainly have been there, but when you really start realizing, okay, Mackie lives here, and I'll be like, well, can't we just walk on down to Williamsburg? She's like, Mom, that's a 20-minute car ride. I was like, whoa, I didn't realize that. So anyway, I'm learning more about Brooklyn. I look forward to spending time there with her when allowed. But yeah, it was good. I'm glad that you and our friend Michelle got to visit. So that was fun. And I know it meant a lot to Mackie.
I love too, just thinking about Mackie Payton and her line of work. Mm-hmm. How much talent over the history of music and musical theater and acting, how much talent has actually come out of Brooklyn. Let's just think about that for a minute. And we don't have to go.
Well, let's hope that doesn't stop now. Yes.
No. That's what I'm saying. She's in that space. Good karma there. Okay. Before we jump into our discussion today about bravery and courage, let's hop to this quick advertisement. Self-Smarter listeners, I'm so happy to share with you a little secret that we've been working on that is coming soon to you, our devoted listeners. In just a couple of weeks, we will have some of the tools and helpful information that we talk about each week on the podcast available to you. We are doing this because you've asked for it. We haven't had it to give you, and now we've been working hard here to prepare solutions that may be of service to you as you develop yourself and your teams. Stay tuned. I'll be back with more details soon, but just know our team cares so deeply about your success, and we hope this new evolution of Self-Smarter proves it to you. #excited. Okay, Danelle, I think it's only fair that we open with why we're having this discussion today. And you lightly gave us reasoning up at the top, but I thought we could really unpack that today. You found this really intriguing.
I did, and I've come at it from a number of ways, but it led me to want to deeply understand the difference. And I'll be honest with you, the catalyst really started when we read Atlas of the Heart. We have a whole episode on that. You can go back and check it out. But, we're big fans of Brene Brown. And she talks about courage in Dare to Lead. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But the way she describes courage in Atlas of the Heart really helped me understand, really to get to thinking about courage versus bravery. And what I've experienced as a leader is at times, the team used to call me their fearless leader. Mm-hmm. And as I matured and as I've been on this journey the last 8-9 years, post the 26% approval rating, I realized, wait a minute, no, I'm filled with fear. Mm-hmm. If a leader of an organization where other people's livelihoods are responsible, if you're not facing some version of fear, I don't truly believe you're living in reality.
Totally.
And then certainly with all the changes in my personal life, fear is something I've had to get really comfortable with. And prior to that, I really focused on vulnerability, and I focused on other ways to wrap my mind around showing up to be the human leader that I want to be in the workplace and in my own, and then be the person that I want to be. My personal life, those are interchangeable to me because I don't really have boundaries relative to who I want to be. I want to be that person all the time. That being said, what I've learned in this study, and I went pretty deep into this topic, is I've started to correct people that I'm either are coming to me and saying, you're so brave to move to New York City. And I realized the difference, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is bravery is something, but courage. And it's like, do I want to be brave in my life or do I want to be courageous? And when we are intentional and we're conscious of the way we're facing anything, whatever it may be, it can be something small, but if it requires a judgment, then that's when you're like, okay, this is, bravery, and again, not to get too deep into it, this right at this juncture, we will in a sec, is bravery, you're putting fear aside. But courage, you're bringing it's with you. And so I just think that's important for us as leaders and people to really start to get more comfortable, because what's happened is we use those words interchangeably, but they definitely have different meanings.
They do.
And I think knowing the difference between the two, they're both necessary. Mm-hmm. They're both necessary. But when you were thinking about putting ourselves in a mindset for success, it's good to know when to utilize one of those acts.
Right.
Okay, in this moment, I'm going to be brave, and we'll talk about some examples in this moment. I'm choosing to be courageous.
Yes.
So where is, what is the reason why this is important is because what it helps us do when we can understand them and we understand the difference, that's how we can combat fear.
You're totally right. And this is something that we are going to have to be, me specifically, is be very conscious of when I'm in a situation to be brave or to be courageous. I'm not conscious of that. I just think I'm being brave. Yeah. Always blanket.
Always brave.
Always brave.
I never thought of courage.
Yeah.
Much.
I never go, oh, now this is going to take some courage. Like I just don't think like that. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know for people, but what that causes now, and you realize this about me in preparing for this episode, and I'm sure I'm not alone out there, is I don't know the damn difference.
Right. Exactly. So, I can tell you don't, because I watch you, and we have, and
I still struggle.
Yeah. And I think it's really started to come when we're talking about things in our personal life.
Yes.
And I think that's when it really started, and not just with you, but with other friends that I have that are going through some things. It's like they're using the word brave. And I think when you think about bravery, you're like, oh, when I'm brave, I'm not fearful. Yes. That's actually pretty accurate. You're putting fear aside.
Right.
But in most things, especially as it relates to emotions, it requires courage. And courage, the fundamental aspect of courage is vulnerability.
Right.
See, vulnerability is not necessarily needed when we're brave.
No,
so every time you call me brave, and you have, I'm like, wait a minute, that means I'm not being vulnerable. Okay. I'm not showing her that this was hard for me, that this required deep thought and mindfulness. Yeah.
Okay. Listeners, are you tracking? Woo!
I know. And for those of you who are like, really, is this, I really do, I can tell you that I have benefited by knowing the difference. Oh. And now you're not going to be able to, if you stick with us through this episode, you will now hear it. These two acts used, these words used interchangeably.
Yes.
And it'll start to probably irritate you just a bit.
Yes.
I'm not kidding.
Yes.
Like, it's one of those things.
And I say it knowing I'm saying the wrong damn thing. Like, I just say it anyway, as I'm so conditioned
to be.
But I gotta change that, right?
Yeah.
So let's start with, I think you've teed us up really well to go dive into the definition. So let's really unpack that.
And we're going to do, we have multiple ways, because I know all of you learn differently, and we certainly do too. Yes. But I'm going to start off with the most to the point difference between the two. And then we can go into a more specific definition for the two. But bravery is more spontaneous and involves setting fear aside. Courage, on the other hand, is about having fear, being mindful of the risk, and making the conscious decision to do something anyway. Both bravery and courage there's times where they're both appropriate. So that's the thing to remember. Yes. And this is true in both in the workplace and in our personal lives. And so that, to me, is the most simplistic difference between the two. Okay. Is basically bravery, we're putting fear aside. Yep. Courage, we're welcoming it, and we're using vulnerability and trust. And we'll go through some great descriptors of that Brene has provided for us. But what is bravery? It's the act of showing fearlessness to overcome adversity. It focuses on the ability to confront and conquer one's fears, taking action despite the potential risk or personal reservations. Mm-hmm. So bravery is basically confronting the known.
Yes.
Okay.
In a very summarized fashion.
Confronting the known.
And you said earlier, when I misused the word bravery, you go, no, like, people who exercise bravery on a daily basis are people running into a fire to put out the fire.
Right.
People who run into the danger are military and do it because they know what's on the other side.
Yep.
And they know exactly what they have to do.
Right. Yep.
Right?
Correct.
Okay.
No, that's absolutely correct. And so that doesn't mean that and those are pretty stereotypical, definite, examples of bravery. And we'll talk some more about that in a second. But relative to courage, courage is having the mental strength to stand up for what is right or advocating for others, especially in the face of opposition or societal pressures. It's courage is having fear and deciding to do something anyway. So another way to say it is when we're courageous, we're embracing the unknown.
So then to boil it down, bravery is known and courage is unknown. I know I'm running into the fire versus I'm standing on the side of the street. I'm not a fire person, a fire professional, like fireman. And now I'm going to run across the street into the fire. That's courage.
Yeah. So there's just yes. Okay. And there's a bit of a nuance. Bravery is confronting is key word. Okay. The known. Courage is embracing the unknown. Okay. See the difference there? So we're embracing the unknown. We're opening ourselves up and we're choosing to move forward anyway. Okay. So there's you could use any number of examples of that, but I like to think of it relative to acts of bravery are things that we just move forward with and do it. And courage is we're using mindfulness. We're using our hearts because it requires vulnerability. Bravery sometimes doesn't require our hearts. It just requires our will. So that's where the nuance of the difference becomes. And so are they completely opposite? No, they're not. Bravery is sometimes required in courage. It can precede courage at times. So when you're thinking about acts that require your emotional self to be exposed, it's a great way to think about it too. You're exposing yourself to lead others or to make decisions or whatever it may be. That's where, the courage comes in. And when we can think about, wow, we can be in control of courage when we choose to sit next to fear and still decide to move anyway. So we're not embracing paralysis. We know that this is going to be bumpy. We already know that the road ahead is going to have some potential treacherous aspects to it. But we're still going to move forward anyway because we know on the other side that's where we want to be. So I don't know if that helps a little bit when you're looking at the two. It's, again, I can't see that pothole or I can't see that quicksand. I'm certain that it's going to be there, but I'm going to choose to move forward anyway.
When you put it that way, I think more of our days probably are spent in the courage more than we're spent in the bravery.
Yeah, relative to leadership.
Yes. And
so I know this about myself. I will choose 99 times out of 100 to be seen as a courageous leader.
Yeah.
To be seen as someone who courageously made decisions in their life, even though it required great change. Because I want to be known as someone who learned to embrace vulnerability. And I became a better leader when I took that armor off. So we can also think about bravery. We have the armor on. We have the armor on, and we're making a decision, or we're doing something. There's times that require that. But when you think about working with people, and growing people, and being the best version of yourself, it's really courage. It's really courage, to me, sets us up for more success than being brave. And so that's why I have become so conscious of these two, the nuances between the two.
I think it's interesting that you brought up armor, because armor is the protective layer. So we've talked about this in armor, agility, and acceptance during one of our past podcast. I can't remember which one it is.
34.
34.
Yeah, the one that talks about the move to New York.
That's right. And it's the armor is the courage breaks down the armor.
Yes. So let me give you a perfect example. In that episode, I talk about my depression.
Yes.
I talk about hitting, in fact, it was a year ago. And we just, yesterday had been a year since Shelby passed, sweet Shelby, and we celebrated her last night and yesterday. And when I think about that time, Bravery would have been, it's brave of me to move through that moment in time. It was brave of me to hire a therapist and get help. But that didn't require me it eventually required me being vulnerable. But the decision to hire the therapist and go into the intense therapy that I went into, that was brave. It was courageous of me to actually share that.
Yes. Okay.
Openly, that I struggled.
Got it.
And that even though
you didn't know if people would accept you for that. And
correct.
All your fears
or they're seeing me as maybe someone they didn't, they maybe see me differently. Maybe they're seeing me as weak. But courageousness never involves weakness, because vulnerability is not about being weak. It's the strongest way to be courageous is to be vulnerable. And I've learned that. And it took me some time, to get comfortable with it. I had to think about sharing my story on that episode. And you didn't know how much of it I was going to share.
No.
And so again, I think it's times like that can pull us through if we think about, wait a minute, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to have the excitement, but I'm also going to have some fear. You can experience those things at the same time.
Yes.
So I think that's where it comes in. And, Brene talks to us about vulnerability. Talks to us, yes, about vulnerability, obviously a lot. We all know that. But she talks about in Dare to Lead that when we're courageous, there's basically 4 skills we need. And she's talking about it specific to leadership. So this is in the Dare to Lead book. We'll put links to all this stuff and some great articles as well. And she basically says, in order to be a courageous leader, you have to possess the ability to be vulnerable. You have to have clarity of your values, not just written them down, but to actually live your values, know what they are, live them. You have to be not only someone who can trust others, but that can also exhibit the ability to be trustworthy. So trust is the 3rd skill, and the 4th skill is being able to rise up. And when Brene talks about rising up, she calls them rising skills. What she means is to be able to experience a defeat and move and grow from it and not be paralyzed by it. So there's a lot of great, and we'll put some articles out there. There's a great one from Forbes that I have here, but I won't get too deep into it. But I like how she defines vulnerability. She says vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. She says leaders exhibit courageous leadership when they are willing to be vulnerable. They're all in, even though it means they may fail or get hurt. Contrary to popular opinion, vulnerable leadership isn't soft or weak. She says vulnerability sounds like the truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. I can't tell you how many times I've had to read that to get through a lot of decisions in this business and a lot of decisions in my personal life, and to remember that because I think as society, and we've talked about this too, we have an episode on vulnerability. We'll put links to all these past episodes that we're referring to, because Megan and I just cannot remember numbers. This is episode 73. So please, I hope we've published enough episodes that you are going to be forgiving and you can hop on the internet in 2 minutes and see these links. But being vulnerable, we're taught, and we are often, especially as women and men, but it's a truth because we can experience it as women, that it's a weakness. And it's just not. And so I think the journey to become more vulnerable as a leader and a person led me to want to define for myself moments of bravery and moments of courage. And like I've said a couple of times already, I prefer courage because that's allowing me to be more open and honest, sit next to fear, name the fear, welcome it, but move forward anyway.
You're bringing up a good point about the fear. I mean, the truth is fear is inevitable.
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
but we try to act like it's not there.
Right.
We try to do everything we can
to suppress it
instead of inviting it up. Now, listen, I've been to a lot of therapy to learn how to do it.
Yes.
But you can go to therapy all you want, but if you don't start practicing things, it's not going to be worth it. But yeah, learning to be okay with it. It's okay to be fearful.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think people, we struggle with this. We struggle with this idea of, oh, we want you to be brave. And, oh, we want you to look like courage. We want you to look like those things. But fear is the vulnerability.
Yeah.
So you can't be courageous then or brave without it because there is nothing to combat if you don't have anything to fear. Right.
But at the same time, again, the nuance is that bravery can sometimes be more of a mind over matter.
Okay.
Where courage, we're opening up our hearts.
Yeah.
We're thinking with our hearts as well as our minds. Sometimes bravery just requires a mindset. I'm just going to run through that thing, or I'm just going to do that thing. And I'm not going to think about the fear.
Right. You've trained yourself.
You trained yourself. You may have identified it and you've decided, I'm going to do it anyway. Courage is different. Courage requires much more of your heart being exposed. Mm-hmm. And I think knowing that can put us in a position to be a more respected, and it's the truth for me, a more respected and more seen as a more thoughtful leader, not just one that I can overcome anything. Mm-hmm. And I was that leader for a long time, and it served this business well. I was a very brave leader. Starting this business was brave. It ended up being courageous, but the initial kicking it off was I used 100% sure will to start this company.
Right.
So, yeah.
One of the people, and I brought this up to you when we were talking about this episode, but one of the things that sticks out to me about this topic is, obviously it's not a new topic, bravery versus courage. I think in one's lifetime, we come across these words and these feelings in different ways. And when you started talking about courage a little bit more, I said to you, what's surfacing for me is the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Because in the Wizard of Oz, one of the characters, which y'all, do I have to even tell y'all? That's the lion, the cowardly lion. All he wants is courage. Mm-hmm. He doesn't ask for bravery.
No.
He doesn't ask he asks for courage. And at the end of the movie, the Wizard of Oz dubs him courageous.
Yeah.
And it sets him free just to be told
that's
you're
right.
courageous.
You're courageous by even admitting that you've been courageous all along.
Yes.
Because I love the way that's explained is that, is it the Oz that talks to him?
It's the Wizard of Oz.
The wizard.
The wizard.
The wizard says it's the people who are marching through the street, the men with their weapons and their thing. And what is
every day. Okay,
every day.
The quote is, back where I come from, we have men who are called heroes. I wish I could do it in his voice. Once a year, they take their fortitude out of mothballs and they parade it down the main street and have no more courage than you have, my friend.
Right. I love that. It's you can, again, there is a role and a time for bravery. We need bravery in many aspects of our life. But in the end, it's courage that's really going to help us position ourselves for a lot more success and happiness.
Yeah.
And I want us to be seen today as more courageous in our leadership, courageous in our lives. And I think having to have faced both, I became more conscious of, again, the differences and when to utilize both. And I do think that that's serving me well.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
One of the things, too, in researching for this that I wanted to bring up was the Latin word COR, core.
Core.
So courage is derived from that Latin root, and that Latin root means of the heart.
Correct.
So all of a sudden we were just reading this like an hour ago, and I was thinking, okay, Sacre Coeur, which is in Paris. It's a theater. No, it is a church, y'all. It's a church.
I was about to say,
and
wow,
it's way
changed.
up high. You have to trek all these steps.
I've made those steps.
Yes, I have too. And to get to the top, and it's Sacred Heart. Sacre Coeur means Sacred Heart. So just think of all the words that have that little derivative in it. Not from now on.
Right. COR.
COR or core or anything like that. I will be thinking about the heart, which is one of my favorite things.
Yeah. And Brene talks about it. She says that the original word, so she talks about the Latin core, which is word that means heart, to your point.
Yes.
But early on, the word courage meant to speak one's mind by telling all of one's heart.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
And then over time, the definition changed, and today we typically associate courage with heroic and brave deeds. That's what she talks about. But if you think about it, its meaning originated is when we open ourselves up, when we open up our hearts.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we can be taught or led to believe that in leadership, whether it's in our personal or in lives or the workplace, that our hearts aren't part of it. It's what we think, and we utilize our minds versus our hearts to move us forward. And again, there's times for both, but I know by and large, when I think with my heart open, and when I share with my heart open to this team. And when I'm that way in relationships in my outside of the workplace, I have found much more, I don't know if the word is success, but I am more fulfilled in those moments than when I've held back and I've used armor to mask myself. I still struggle with it. I still struggle. I'll put up armor as quick as anybody else.
Sure.
I still struggle in certain moments, but at least I can be aware of it.
Yes.
I can be made aware. And because in the relationships that I've chosen to share those vulnerabilities with, people can see it for me. You can tell me, Danelle, you're clearly struggling. You're putting up an armor, and it's okay. And then sometimes I can see it for myself, and sometimes I need people in my life to help me with it. But you would have never known that if I hadn't have shared.
Right.
So it was courageous of me to share that.
Right.
Again, just more context for people who are listening. So
Danelle, now that we've talked about fear a little bit, talk to us how it plays a role in our lives. Like, how does fear show up outside of the flip side's bravery and courage? But what are some things as leaders we're looking out for?
I mean, the thing about fear is that everyone experiences it. And the worst part is that when we allow it to, it hinders our ability to reach our fullest potential.
Yes.
No matter what we're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
So it's like, let's just give fear a big old hug and let it be okay.
Yes.
Okay? Like, let's not be paralyzed, right? But let's if you can just think about fear as something that maybe you carry in your backpack, I don't know. It's just like my doctor tells me, like, name it, be okay with it. And I have to sometimes mentally think that way. Like, is this something?
Hey.
Yeah, is this a tiny fear that can fit in my pocket, or is this going to be like my extra large 2-meter suitcase? I don't know, or do I need to get a truck backed up in here? Like, I have to measure really what is the fear.
Yes.
And so
this is one of our most fearful years yet.
Oh yeah,
at DMA, because we're doing new things.
We're doing a lot of new things,
including this podcast.
Continuing with it.
Yes,
it was supposed to be a 1-year thing. Let's see how things go. And now, we overcame the fear of doing it. And are we relevant? Are even people going to listen? And you kept listening. Thank you. And you're sharing.
Yes.
And so then it's like a whole nother level of fear. And now we're evolving Self-Smarter, beyond a podcast to be able to serve you well with resources and coaching and a lot of other things. So now we're layering on the fear. but because we can be comfortable with it. Like, what is the worst that can happen? We have a mindset that can help us navigate fear, and fear is part of our team versus the thing we're trying to avoid. We're able to move forward.
Yeah.
And so obviously the antidote to fear is moving forward.
It is.
But sometimes we're moving forward with our minds, and most of the time I hope we can move forward with our hearts.
Yes.
Open wide.
Right now, I think we're in a brave role.
A moment, because we're building.
We're in a moment.
So we just have to build things.
Yes.
Courage is when we launch this thing
Yes.
and we hear crickets. So please, there'll be more of that to come.
Just click.
Just click.
Click on anything.
Be curious, please. Funny. Help us. No,
more coming soon.
Yes.
By the way, but let's talk about just to help set the landscape. Examples of things that could be plaguing our listeners from a leadership perspective. Okay.
I think intimidation.
Okay. Wow. Do you struggle with that?
You know, I probably should be intimidated more than what I am. I've been able to navigate intimidation.
And you know what that is?
What?
That's lack of humility.
Right.
Which is one of your biggest weaknesses.
Right. Yeah. Is to
but to weave in hungry, humble, smart.
That's right. And so humility, and again, you have to listen to that episode, which we'll put a link to it. Humility isn't that you're not grateful or whatever. No. Humility is allowing yourself to honestly be more vulnerable to failure, to not being the strongest. And so, intimidation, I think there's a fine line.
Up from that.
Intimidation to me is so externally driven. So for me, the intimidation that I have been working on is what's inside.
Yes.
Being intimidated by my own thoughts.
Yes.
My own limitations.
Yes. I'm not a good leader.
Right. Because
I'm intimidated by
all the things I think I have to know in order to
be the perfect leader.
Right. And I don't want to be a perfect leader.
No, you don't, but I think a lot of people do.
I do think that.
Yes.
And so I think you have to look at intimidation as being, is this something that I'm being externally intimidated by? That's a whole different ballgame than what you're internally being intimidated by. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. I go to 1 in stress. 1s are notorious. The biggest thing that, that a 1 struggles with is the inner dialogue. It's the inner critic, and it's the strongest of all the Enneagram 9 numbers.
No, that's why I feel sorry for you the most.
1 struggle with it. But by knowing it and naming it,
yes,
I think we can. Now, intimidation that is coming from a bully externally or someone in the workplace that's not treating you well or harassing you, that's what I meant when I say I haven't struggled a lot with that.
Got it.
So let me be very clear there. But it's the internal intimidation that I've had to work on that has kept me from being the most humble leader and person that I could be.
Okay. What's another thing? So,
I mean, people struggle with, fear of speaking up or speaking out.
That kind of my hand.
Right. So I think, I think that is something that speaking out in its initial form or speaking up, bravery is involved.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just have to do the thing.
Yeah.
You just have to talk about it. Courage is when you probably get pushed back on that. And then you have to keep going, and you have to keep your heart open, and you have to expose yourself a little bit more. That's when the act becomes a courageous one. So that's something that I think people will struggle with. I think in that same kind of vein, I think people are fear of sharing their ideas. And sometimes that comes from maybe you're new to a work environment, and do I think you need to navigate when's the right time to share those ideas? Of course. I think you need to be conscious of that. But I think sharing ideas in any form or fashion can be intimidating. It depends on the audience. So I think that's something that people fear.
What I'm hopeful for, all the things that you just said are leading me to think, yes, as a leader, I do struggle with those things. Anybody, human struggles with those things. But what I'm going to ask our listeners to do after listening to you talk about those things is ask yourself if people that you're leading are struggling with those things. Because if you're aware of that, you can help them. you can help them with the intimidation issues. You can help them with the fear of speaking out or speaking up. And you know who they are.
Yeah.
You know exactly who it is as we're talking through it right now. And so giving them permission and talking about bravery and courage may not be the worst thing.
No.
You could do for them.
Not at all. And again, and I think if you're with us, and I hope that you are in this episode, I hope we've, explored these topics, these acts enough so that you can understand the nuance. And in your own mind, in those moments, you're like, I need to be brave. I need to say something. I need to share that idea. Courage comes in when you're sticking with it, and people don't clap when you share that big idea. And you hear crickets.
Which we're both used to that.
We're very, very accustomed to crickets.
By the way.
But yeah, exactly. So I think, again, that nuance is like, I'm going to be brave. I'm going to say something. I'm going to continue with the bravery, and I'm going to evolve into being courageous, because I'm not going to be paralyzed when I don't hear exactly what I wanted to hear back.
It's maybe one of the most powerful role model moves a leader can do is to show courage, to show bravery and courage. Yeah. When you don't have a role model doing that as a parent, as a leader of any kind, how you expect me to do it? Exactly.
And it is, if you want to have team members, if you want to have children, if you want to have, the people in your life, if you want them to be the best version of themselves, and you're committed to that as well, better every day, courage is required.
It is.
And it's an act. And a lot of times it needs to be emulated. Like, you need to do it. If I want the people around me to be more courageous in their lives, I have to be able to show that too. They have to do the work.
It's a we move, not a me move.
Correct. Yes. That's a great way to say it.
Okay. So in terms of overcoming it, overcoming fear in order to, let's talk about that with bravery and courage.
So here's the thing as we start to wrap this topic, is that, there's just great power, and I've experienced it. So I know this to be true, is that there's great power in both bravery and courage, because it allows us to grow personally and develop.
Oh, yeah.
And if you think about if we're able to effectively utilize both in our everyday lives, think about the impacts on a micro and macro level.
Amazing.
I mean, I really, truly believe that when we're able to step forth as the best version of ourselves, we're able to use both. And we are conscious of when both are needed, which version is needed, and how to utilize them for the best outcome. And when we're exhibiting that, others will see the difference.
Right.
But we do have to be able to talk about it.
No, we do.
We do. We have to be able to understand the differences here. And, I think so much of the things that we struggle with in leadership and life is from lack of understanding these types of things. Like, we just don't have context. Like, the word shame, until Brene brought it to the surface and made it more common and okay to talk about. And I have to give her credit for that, because I'm sure somebody else was talking about shame along the way, but she made it and invited us into it
again
and over and over, and gave us context. And that's what I really love about thinking about bravery and courage. So this is typically where I ask you, what do you know for sure about bravery and courage? But I'd like to twist it a little bit. So what are ways our listeners can really start to embrace bravery and courage in their daily lives? What do you recommend for them? Yeah, I think it's obviously repeating, but summarizing what we've talked about in this episode is bravery and courage both require awareness. So we should be living every day in full awareness, to the best of our abilities. And so when you think about that, like, we don't know fear until we analyze our emotions in any given situation. So in order to be brave or courageous, we have to be able to understand the fear that we're facing.
That's right.
And I gave that example of, can the fear, it will definitely name it, But is it the type of fear that can fit in my front pocket? Is it going to require a backpack? Is it going to require a big suitcase or a truck? I don't know. To carry this thing along with me, like, what version of fear is it? And being honest with yourselves. And if you have to bring others into the discussion for you, depending on what decision you're trying to make, like, sometimes it's as simple as, what's the worst that could happen?
Totally.
Literally, what is the worst that can happen? In some cases, the worst that can happen is detrimental.
Bad.
So bad. But again, living in the awareness requires us to get friendly with fear. I don't know how else to say it. Get friendly with fear to where you embrace it. So that's,
get friendly with fear.
Yeah. That's what I can tell you for sure that I think we have to do. I think we also have to challenge ourselves to do versus think, which ultimately sometimes that's what buries us.
In fear.
And fear is.
We call it like when you're stuck.
Right. You're stuck.
I can't move. I'm stuck in fear.
Mm-hmm. And as most businesses out there, if there's not a business out there, or if you're listening and your business is not facing some version of a challenge today, or if you don't have a personal challenge going on, well, first of all,
God bless you.
Yeah.
Can we get some of that?
Yeah. Yay you. But I mean, if you think about it,
and
this is an example. Let's just take, for instance, if you have a challenge in your business, if you trust yourself and you trust the people around you, then you will speak to that challenge. You will do it openly. You will do it with your heart, meaning you will be vulnerable about naming that challenge, understanding, okay, here's what we might face, but here's what we can do if we do these things, having a version of a plan. How do you overcome fear? A lot of time, obviously, it's naming it. We've said that multiple times, but it's also being prepared and having some options to face that challenge when we're looking at it head on. So I think too, again, I can't express enough the role of vulnerability, which we've talked about, but trusting yourself and others.
Yourself, yes.
Right. And so I think that is required as we move forward is trust has to be a cornerstone, and trust is not something that's innate.
No.
It's not.
No, it's the hardest thing to earn as a leader.
Right. And so we have to want to earn that.
We do.
And trust is earned in small, vulnerable moments in any relationship.
Mm-hmm. Remember that, listeners.
Remember that. And we have a whole episode on that too. So Jesse and the Self Smarter team will, again, put links to these episodes that we're referring to, because we can't, again, remember numbers to save our lives. And then I think too, in the end, for both bravery and courage in our lives, it's doing what you know is right.
That's right.
And just and fair.
Yep.
Most of the time, all will be well. It will be well. And so I believe that both bravery and courage, with a heavy emphasis on courage, because our hearts are more open when we're in that act, is what we need more of in leadership in life. I truly believe that. And Brene says it best. She says, only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of light. So again, that quote has carried me through a very interesting year in my life, and it will carry me through more years ahead. Mm-hmm. And I hope more of those years are filled with courage. And I do believe that will be the difference in a lot of aspects of my life, and it already has been. So again, very passionate about sharing this with y'all. So I hope you're still here. Thank you for sticking with us.
Thank you.
And thank you I've kind of had this out there for a while, and it hasn't made it to the to our episodes, but here we are.
Yes.
I hope I was feeling it.
So
yeah, good.
I'm glad we talked
Thanks
about it.
Thanks for trusting me
Yes.
to talk about this.
I always do. Yes. All right. With that, let's transition to music moment. I want to share with our listeners that Danelle, part of the laughter that she so kindly exposed me to. I was going to say sweetly, but then I knew you'd say I'm not sweet.
Right.
Like Weezer from Still Magnolias. Sidebar. She took me and our friend to see a show called Titanique.
Yes.
Which is that off Broadway?
It's off Broadway. Yeah.
We were off Broadway. Mm-hmm. Yes. Here's the deal, guys. You have to see this thing. If you're in New York It's not like on Broadway where all the big lights are and Lion King and all that.
It's right off Union Square. Right off Union Square.
But wow.
Yeah.
I haven't laughed that hard in a long time.
So it's basically a spoof. I know.
Yes.
And I had already seen it. Yes. Mackie took me to see it for Mother's Day.
You surprised us with it.
Yeah, I surprised you because you both needed laughter.
That was such a sweet Mother's Day gift. I'm sorry that I didn't realize that.
Actually, I take that back. We did. I don't know. We went to
or your
we
birthday.
Did. I can't remember. We went and saw it on an occasion.
Makes sense. Why? Because you love Celine Dion.
I do. But the whole thing is a spoof on Celine Dion, and it's Celine Dion telling the Titanic story.
Yes.
So, and it's just, I think it's so clever. But they use her music throughout. So I guess she had to give permission. Right. But oh my goodness, and they're, you know, it's off Broadway, so it's on a shoestring.
Yes.
But the first of all, the talent could be on any Broadway stage. And anyway, it is.
Please go see it.
It's an affordable laughter hour and a half. It is so well done. And I laughed harder the second time. And I think it was because I could hear y'all laughing. And it was, I don't know, it was so much fun. And Mackie was so jealous. She's like, wanted to go see it again, but so good. And, you know, I'm just a huge fan. And, you know, Celine is such an extra person. Like, and so they build off of that. And she's an extra performer, I should say. So,
well, anyways. She's just exaggerated.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And so I thought it would be fun not only to give a brief highlight of Titanique and the fact that they run and they're up in your business.
They are
out in the show, and you got seats
on purpose.
They specifically would give us trouble during the show, trouble or a blessing. Look at it either way. But they're throwing things for you to catch. You're very much involved.
They're touching you, running by, high-fiving to you. Pointing you out.
Yes.
Yes. Celine. Yeah.
So it's super fun. Definitely look at that. But I thought it would be fun because here's the truth. Danelle always plays Celine Dion music, and everyone in Danelle's life doesn't always appreciate that, including Mackie and me specifically. Yeah. And so maybe some others. So I thought it would be fun because I was reintroduced to all of Celine's music. It's not just Titanic music. It's basically all of Celine's music.
Right.
The favorite songs. And I was like, I love that song. I love that song. Every time they'd sing one. So I thought it would be just as a nod to you to say, wow, thank you for keeping Celine Dion alive in our lives. And what's your favorite Celine Dion song? You have to pick one. Okay.
It's hard.
I know.
But
I had a hard time.
It's not her song, but it's her cover of the song.
Oh.
And it's very long. And I've sang it to you maybe 100 times as we've traveled the world together. But it's all coming back to me now.
Yes, it's all coming back to me now.
It's all coming back.
When Danelle sings the song, in fact, you did after.
I did a little show for you and our friend.
Yes, after the Titanique, we went back to Danelle's apartment for happy hour, and she's performing this. It's like a video. Remember music videos? It's like that. But so she goes into character and she's jumping on furniture and it's really funny. It's really, really funny. And it gives us all a laugh. So I'm not surprised at all.
But I have 5 more. But if that's
what's your number 2?
No, if I can't. I mean, I love All By Myself. I like I'm Alive. But what's yours? Let's talk about yours. I can keep going.
Because You Loved Me.
Yeah.
What movie was that in?
I don't know.
It was something like Robin Hood or... It was something epic in the 90s, but
I don't know.
I loved that song.
Yeah.
That was my favorite. And when she started singing it in the Titanic, I was like, oh, I might cry.
Well, that song is one that catapulted her. That's from her first mainstream album. So when she stopped singing in French, because her early albums are all in French.
Okay.
So, and again, that's what makes her additionally extra.
Yes.
Yeah, her Canadian French isms. Yes. But yeah, Because You Love Me is it might be, and we don't have that fact check, but it might be her first number 1. I'm not sure.
Can I do a Celine impression real quick? I think I can do it.
I mean, yeah.
Let's try it.
What's holding you back?
Okay, here it goes. I am the most beautiful woman in the world. Isn't that from SNL?
Yes. And she definitely has an interesting version of humility.
Yeah, none. 0. She gets a bad score on the humility assessment.
Absolutely. But anyway, if you're in New York, if you want help on which seats to get at the shows, shoot me a message and I'm happy to help you. But I hope you will see it because it's really good. And it just got extended. So it's going to be there for a minute.
Congratulations to them. The whole cast of Titanique. You guys blew our minds. We're going to include them into the show notes to give you a link to that show. We hope you go see it. And thank you, Janelle, for taking me to see that. That was a huge experience. I will never forget it.
My pleasure.
My pleasure. I am the most beautiful, the most wonderful singer in the world. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up today. Thanks so much for being here. Remember, we've got lots for you in the show notes today. Please tell a friend if you enjoyed today's episode or any past episode or any future episode for that matter. Yes. And until next week, we send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming self-smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.